Book review time! Hello everyone, I'm Abe with Mystic Gen Mara, your host for this book review. This one is probably the second or third book in the Abraham-Hicks set that I picked up. This one is probably one of my most favorite, if not probably the one I go back to the most, mainly because it has so many cool exercises in it. So, the little blurb on the back, it's a fascinating book by Esther and Jerry Hicks presenting the teachings of the non-physical entity Abraham, and this will help you learn to manifest your desires so that you're living a joyous, fulfilling life. As you read, you'll come to understand how your relationships, health issues, finances, career concerns, and more are influenced by universal laws that govern your time-space reality. You'll discover powerful processes that will help you go with the positive flow of life. So, that really wasn't the important part to me. It was learning to manifest your desires, which is right on the cover. That one was what caught my eye when I first picked this up in I believe it was Borders. I think the receipt's still in here, because I like to use the receipts as a primary, yes it was, bookmark, and this one was from that time. So, it's been a couple minutes. If you don't know what a Borders is, it was the bookstore, like Barnes and Noble's back in the day couldn't compete with what Borders was capable of. So, but that's where I picked this one up. And this book is broken into two parts, which again is kind of fun because in the first section, it's called Things We Want You to Know, Things You May Have Forgotten, which are important for you to remember. That's an Abraham phrasing. So, whenever Abraham talks, it's, especially when you listen to it, there is a different syntax and a different pattern of speak than when Esther is talking. Because if you watch them very often on some of their shows and some of the clips on YouTube and stuff, there's a point when Esther is speaking, and it's very fluid, very everyday, and then there's this other tone that happens, and her voice pattern changes completely. It still uses the same words, but you can tell that there's something else going on there. So, it breaks down the power of feeling good. How are they, Abraham and the crowd, keeping their promises to us when we came into the physical? They explain the concept of creating our own reality. Do you really do it, or is this life on, play? And then it breaks down basics of understanding of how to fit this all together, what the law of attraction is according to them. And I will have to say, I've read a fair amount and I've practiced a fair amount of the law of attraction and manifestation techniques and things like that. And the one thing that I've always kind of come back to Abraham-Hicks on is they explain it's not just about what do I want. There's so many of the modern day gurus that are good to introduce you to a subject, but you almost have to go back to what they used as their source material to flesh it out fully. You don't really need to do other research. I mean, I recommend reading everything you can possibly get your hands on all the time, but with Abraham-Hicks, they actually give you all the background information and the supporting energies that you need to work with to actually bring stuff into the manifested world, if I could talk. And that's where when they talk about the law of attraction, you get what you think about, whether you want it or not, which is a really true statement. When your desires and beliefs are vibrational matches, that's a little bit different. Rediscovering the art of allowing your natural state of well-being. So when you look at them from those perspectives, and when you go through that section, it's not very long, it's like 8 pages. It actually explains it's not just simply building the vision board and staring at it. There's a lot more that goes into it, and that's what I like these guys, the way they describe it. And they even have a section called You Are a Vibrational Transmitter and Receiver. The more we learn about the pineal gland, third eye, the more that statement means a lot of truth. There's a hidden value behind your emotions and how you respond to situations. Then there's the 3 steps to whatever you want to be, do, or have. And we're not into the second section yet because that's the fun part. There's emotional set points, which is where do you gravitate to and where you settle? Like some people, when they're by themselves and they're not doing anything and they're just there, they're humming, they're happy, they're tapping their foot to some music they're hearing in their minds. Then there's the other ones that when they're in their quiet state, you look at them and they look like they're about ready to, fight the devil for hell. It's all in where you rest yourself, and that's those emotional set points. And then allowing your feelings to be your guide. That sounds a little wonky. The reality is it's learning to trust your intuition and learning to trust your gut instincts. And it's not just, well, I feel this way in the moment. No, there's more to it than that, and they go into all of this. A perfect expanding being in perfect yet expanding world in a perfect yet expanding universe is one of the titles. It's a lot of words there. And for being a title that's that long, it's actually only 5 pages, but it's worth checking out. You are co-creating in a diverse universe, and then we get into different degrees of emotional guidance. You're only 17 seconds away from 68 seconds to fulfillment. That one is an interesting one. And the reason I say that is Abraham brings in a lot of interesting catchphrases, one of which has actually been more scientifically proven, I guess you could call it. I've only read a couple of papers, but there's research being done into this where you can shift a mindset if you can hold a thought for 17 seconds. And a lot of your post-hypnotic suggestions, a lot of the times when you chant mantras, this is the reason that you do it, is you're doing this to trigger a mental shift. Usually takes about 17 seconds to really click it in. But if you can hold it for up to 68 seconds, meaning over a minute, then you can actually change the environment, your perception of the environment you are in. And by doing that, it shifts your emotions, and that's when you start to notice those more instantaneous, quote unquote, manifestations. But you have to start with that first step. You have to get clear on what you're after, and that's some of that stuff of breaking down where you're at, getting those set points, starting to work up. You're not going to go from severe depression to having the perfect life in 68 seconds, but you can go from being depressed to being frustrated to being neutral, which is the scale you're working up, and that's that emotional guidance scale. You start where you're at and figure out where you can go. You're not making leaps of 5 or 6 points. You're generally only doing like 1 or 2, but that's enough to get you better than you were. So it's things like that that you start to practice and you start to put into play that shifts how you respond to the world, which then changes how the world responds to you, as above, so below. But then on page 127, we get into the part that I really like about this book, and that is processes to help you achieve what you now remember. This first part is just basically tapping into what would be our subconscious memories, our connected spiritual concepts, the Akash, however you want to look at that, because we've been conditioned by culture, by religion, by politics, by fill in the blank, to not trust our instincts, to not go with our understanding. It's a common thing to be like, it has to be fully researched. Not really. Science is about asking questions. The more questions you ask, the more scientific you are. When you stop asking questions, that's when you stop being a scientist and become a propagandist. And that applies to everything. That applies to religion. The minute you stop asking questions is the minute you have fallen into the aspect of propaganda within a religion, politics, science, it doesn't matter. Asking questions is what A, this is all about, and B, that's how you grow as a soul, as a person, and as an entity within the universe. Just not asking questions means that you've given up, or you choose to believe what someone else has told you. Why? Honest question. But then they go through 22 processes that can help you build your point of attraction. And before we get into all that, there's a couple of points in here. This one is one that really stuck out to me because I actually put bookmarks in. And this section is you only hear what you are ready to hear. And so basically what this is saying is when Abraham-Hicks, when you watch their stuff, when you read their books, you hear what you're ready to hear. You're not going to hear the same thing that I hear. I'm not going to hear the same thing that you hear. the words can be identical, but our understanding of it is completely different. And that goes into, everyone will not get the same thing from this book, but every reading of this book will get you something new or more. This is a book that will be read by many times by those who understand its power. It is a book that will help physical beings understand their relationship to God and all that they are really. So when we look at it from that perspective, I have like 7 or 8 of these books that I do this with. This is one of them, where I read it the first time, mind-blowing, there's so many cool things here, and I have a journal I keep all my notes and stuff in as I'm going through them, and then I'll put it aside and I'll read something else. I'll come back to it 6 months, a year later, and I will have a completely different response to that book. I'll put it back, not read it for 6 months to a year, 2 years, 3 years. I'll go back and pick it up because I have a memory of what that book did last time. When I read it this 3rd time, 4th time, 5th time, I get something completely different each time. Why? I have integrated, I have shifted, and I have grown, which allows me to see a different perspective every single time I pick up one of these books. This one's a prime example of that. There is a section in here, and just because I have seen other people comment on this, oh well, so-and-so has too much, therefore I'll never have enough. What? That doesn't hold water. Abraham addresses this. There is enough room for all diverse thoughts and experiences. And it says, from your non-physical perspective of the enormous variety of experiences, beliefs, and desires that exist among the people of your world, where we live, Abraham's talking to a person, you feel, we as humanity, feel there's no need to omit or control, or from his perspective, they don't need to worry about us controlling stuff, because what's the point? You understand there is now room enough in this expansive universe for all manners of thought and experience. You had every intention of being deliberate about your own creative control, and your own creations, but you had no intention of trying to control other people. So when we look at it from that perspective, that's just the start of it. There's another section here I had noted. Maybe. Where to go? The variety of thoughts did not frighten you, instead inspired you, for you knew that you were each the creator of your own experiences. You understood that your exposure to the contrast inspires specific directions within you. And that just because others chose differently, it does not make you right, them wrong, or anything else. This is that concept of we can be diverse but not fight about it. If so-and-so is a multimillionaire and you're scraping by, that doesn't mean that they are taking something from you. And that also doesn't mean that you have to wait for a handout. When you start to understand how the law of attraction actually works and not the fluffy bunny version of it, you have to go with inspired action, but you have to get the mindset first. This is on you. That's on me. It's all a personal decision. When we start to make those mental and conscious decisions that shift how we respond, the key aspect of this book and most of the books after this one in the Abraham series anyway, it's very clear that it is a personal responsibility, personal accountability. I love to preach that because it's true and everything, that we have to make those decisions. It doesn't matter what someone else has. There's no such thing as there's a cap on it and we all have to eat from the same pie. That doesn't work that way. The tech world is a prime example of that. And if you look at spirituality, oh, we all have to eat from the same pie. Is that why there's the amount of religions and spiritual practices they are? Because I'm pretty sure we're not eating from the same pie anymore. It's because we can make our own. So we get into the exercises. There's 2 in particular I want to highlight. This one is you have to put a happy face on it. And this is where you're focusing energy to change your vibrational offering. You have to be consciously aware every single day of where your emotions are sitting. This isn't easy, and this is kind of a slap in the face. I will be 100% honest. When you first start looking at it, you're like, I have to do what? From experience, personally, when you're starting to go down a depressive state, something that's happened to me since I was 13 years old, at least every 18 months or so, I crash. It's just, I know how my body works, I know how my mind works, I'm attuned to the flow there. When it goes down, I either stay down longer or I start to actively look for ways to bump my moods. I get up in the morning, I find a reason to get a shower, a reason to go to work. I put myself in a state of, even if it's just, well, I have to have a place to live. You're putting yourself a higher vibration, a higher mindset than the depression, because that's very, very heavy. So you have to kind of process where you're at, and sometimes it's literally just enough to get you out of that funk. It doesn't mean you're going to solve all your problems that day, but through the process of shifting and learning that it's possible to work out of those things, it can change a lot over time. Get the help that you need. I'm not saying not to do that, but also be aware that you have an active role to play. You cannot just rely on an outside force to fix it. You got to start inside and work from there. So, and it's like there's uncontrollable stuff. Don't worry about that. Worry about what you can worry about, or fix what you can fix is a better term. Deliberate creation is choosing better feeling thoughts. Literally, there's times that's all you can do. The purpose of the process is to release your resistance. Once you start getting into a better headspace, all of a sudden it changes how you look at life. Like when I'm having my down points, there's times that I've lost jobs because of that, and it's because of the mindset that I'm in. There's other times where might lose hours, but I still keep the job, and I'm frustrated, and I'm processing, like, what am I doing? And eventually get to that point where you go from depression to anger, frustration, and up. Then you pull yourself out of it, but it's not because you're staying where you're at. You are making a conscious decision to move out of that point. Is it easy? No. But the reward is worth it, because once you get into a much more ease state, the flow kicks back in, and then it's just picking the better feeling thought every time. And so you can keep moving up in the cycle of that process. So the next section after putting a smile on it is the rampage of appreciation. And this is something that if you're having a rough day when you get home from work, find some time when you can just be alone for a few minutes. 15 minutes is usually enough. And start writing down the positives. Don't even look. Don't think about the negative. Sit down on a piece of paper, even if you're mad. Well, I have a house to live in. Apartment, whatever. I have this piece of paper. I have a vehicle. I have a dog. I have a wife. I have a husband. Write these things down, and as you're doing it, put emotion into them. And then keep going and get more and more detailed as to what it is. And here pretty soon you're going to just have this lightening of your energy. Because at that point, you're getting into the point of, I actually do have a really good life, even though I may not have fill in the blank. Those are things to shoot for. The appreciation and gratitude that you feel for all of these things. I am so happy and grateful now that. I am so happy and grateful for this person. I am so happy and grateful for this thing. And as you're doing that, you're feeling it. And I like how they call it a rampage of appreciation, because eventually you get into this point where you're so enjoying what you're doing, you lose track of time. Set a timer for 15 if you are feeling like I have to make this point, but you can go longer than that. Get into that vibration of appreciation and joy, and it changes a lot within a very short period of time. There's the prosperity game, which is another fun one, and that one's on 177 in this edition if you're interested. But the one that I really like, and this one is kind of like a vision board you can redo every month, and it's called the focus wheel process. And they give you what points to use these things. When to use this process. When you realize the current vibrational point of attraction is not where you want to be. I think we all have those days. When you are aware that you're feeling negative emotions about something that is important and you want to find a positive emotion instead. When something has happened, it's not your liking and you want to change about it while it's on your mind, and then when you are reaching for a feeling of relief. So you start with this wheel aspect and you write down where you're at, what would be the next step up from where you're at, where you want to be. So you go 1, 2, and you kind of set it like that. But then you kind of go through and you write down where you're at and where you want to be. So try to identify what you do not want as well as what you want in terms of the way you want to feel about it, not just think about it. So when you're like, I feel fat, I want to feel slender. I feel deceived, I want to feel honored. I feel powerless, I want to feel in my power. And you go from there, and then you start to do like the bubble thing, where you start to write each of these out, and then you write out how you can do that. How would you make that happen? What does it look like? And you fill the paper around it with all of the positive statements. But you're starting off with, I feel slender. How do you do this? How does that make you feel? What are the thoughts associated with being that way? So you start going through this process, and you write it down. There's a way to do it with a clock. So you start kind of like the tapping thing, where you start in one spot, and by the time you work around your face, you're in a better place. It's the same concept. You have in the center where you want to be, but you start at the 1 o'clock, your starting point. Where am I at? How is this making me feel right now? But then you work around it. This exercise is only like 4 or 5 pages long, but the more you do it, the easier it starts to get to shift. And the more focus that you can put into that exercise, you can actually start to build entire concepts about it. And there's times after a little bit of practice and experimenting, you can get to a point where you don't even need to be in a bad place. You can just start, this is what I'm working on next, this is where I'm at, and around the circle you go. Because that way you can actually trigger the response that's going to help you move into that higher state. That's going to help you manifest things in a much more rapid way. So these are all little exercises that you can go through this book. There's honestly, and I say this with a few other things, but with this one in particular, even if you get a digital copy of this book, I recommend picking up just a little Spyro notebook, the 80-page, the 180, whatever it is you want to do, and start on page 1. Go through a chapter, write down what your thoughts, feelings, impressions are. Do it with second chapter. When you get to the exercises, this is really why you need the physical paper. And in my mind, and I've seen some studies on this, when we write stuff in our own handwriting, it actually sets in our brain better than clicking away on a computer. When you get to the exercises, do an exercise a page, or 2 pages, or 5 pages. Really dedicate some time to it, and watch not so much how the world shifts around you, because that'll happen no matter what, but watch how you change, because it does do some interesting shifts in awareness, and helps you understand that there's a lot more that we as individuals have control over because of personal accountability, personal responsibility. But it also reminds us how the universe conspires to work with us when we go through those things. So I hope you guys are interested in Ask and It Is Given. There'll be a link in the description if you want to check it out. It is a very good book, highly recommend it, and I will talk to you guys in a future video.